Unit 2 of the second module focuses on several agreements and guidance frameworks endorsed by the global community with the shared objective of sustainable and resilient development. In addition to the CEDAW, several specific international frameworks govern disaster risk reduction, climate change, humanitarian assistance, and sustainable development, which address gender equality within the thematic areas they focus on. The Rio Conference on the Environment and Development in 1992 acknowledged and reaffirmed the principle of gender equality and the need to ensure the effective participation of women and Indigenous peoples in all initiatives related to climate change. These calls were reiterated in the Rio Plus 20 outcome document in 2012. Gender dimensions are determined as a central theme in the global development, disaster risk reduction, and humanitarian agenda. All global guidance frameworks leading to the 2030 Agenda for Resilience commit to gender equality and women's empowerment. The Sendai Framework for DRR, the first of the series of agreements towards 2030 Agenda, brings a turning point in perception of women and girls in disasters and the approach to address gender issues in disaster risk management. It emphasizes that women and their participation are critical to effectively managing disaster risk and designing, resourcing, and implementing gender-sensitive disaster risk reduction policies, plans, and programs. Adequate capacity-building measures need to be taken to empower women for preparedness as well as build their capacities for alternate livelihood means, post-disaster situations. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, adopted by world leaders in 2015, embody a roadmap for progress that is sustainable and leaves no one behind. While SDG 5, Achieve Gender Equality and Empower All Women and Girls, call for concerted action, achieving gender equality and women's empowerment is integral to all dimensions of inclusive and sustainable development, integral to each of the 17 goals. Sustainable Development Agenda gives strong messages that women and girls everywhere must have equal rights and opportunities and be able to live free of violence and discrimination. Women's equality and empowerment is one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Only by ensuring the rights of women and girls across all the goals, the Sustainability Agenda will move forward. In short, all the SDGs depend on the achievement of Goal 5.
The parties to the Paris Agreement for Climate Change also acknowledge that adaptation, including capacity building for mitigation and adaptation action, should be gender responsive, participatory, and fully transparent, taking into consideration vulnerable groups, communities, and ecosystems. On 12th of December 2015, countries under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change adopted the Paris Agreement. It marks a critical turning point towards a zero-carbon and resilient world. The Paris Climate Agreement came into force on 4th of November 2016. Following the global agreements of 2015, SDGs, Sendai Framework, and the Paris Agreement for Climate Change, the World Humanitarian Summit was held in 2016 to bring attention to the status of humanitarian crisis facing the world in current times. The purpose of the summit was to generate commitments to reducing suffering and deliver better in response to the highest level of human suffering witnessed since the Second World War. The summit underlined the importance of addressing gender issues in humanitarian assistance and called for gender equality, women's empowerment, and women's rights to become pillars of humanitarian action, including in disaster preparedness and response. The summit generated 509 specific commitments on women and girls to achieve 1. Gender-responsive programming, capacity building of women's groups, and gender equality initiatives. 2. Gender-based violence prevention and response. 3. Sexual and reproductive health. And 4. Women's involvement in mediation and peace processes. The Addis Ababa Action Agenda for Financing for Development adopted a number of documents that link gender equality and women's rights with climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction and call on states to integrate these issues within development financing. It aims to address the challenges of financing and creating an enabling environment at all levels for sustainable development in the spirit of global partnership and solidarity through the 3 dimensions: promoting inclusive economic growth, protecting the environment, and protecting social inclusion. The recently concluded Global Platform for DRR in 2019, based on the status of government and stakeholder updates since 2015, has noted the gaps in the translation of commitments to achieve results and highlighted the need for focused action and investments in the area. The chair's summary ascertained that voices of women, including at the grassroots, should be reflected at all stages of development and implementation of national and local strategies. Gender-sensitive and responsive approaches contribute to stronger disaster risk reduction interventions, reducing the vulnerability of women in times of disaster. Their leadership roles must be strengthened. In order to translate commitments to women's inclusion into real progress, increased attention and targeted resources are required. Thank you for watching this video on gender equality in the Global Agreements and Guidance Frameworks of 2015 to 2016, and we hope you gain some perspectives in disaster preparedness and humanitarian response for local actors.